Ladies and gentlemen, we are going to jump right into our panel discussion and take some of the questions. And the folks who are going to be here, they're going to tell you how to connect with the industry, what we are looking to invest in, and what you should not try. So may I request the panel to come up? All right, folks, what we're going to do is let me do a very quick introduction. Art is someone who will represent the entrepreneurial side of things. He's a technology developer, and not on the hundreds of millions of dollars aspect, but more on the 1 to 10 million area. On the other end is Jim Sledzik. Jim is on a venture fund, which is $775 million, 39 investments, 19 successful exits. He will not tell me how many unsuccessful exits there were. And in the center is Baker Hughes, Chief Technology Officer. He is actually a veteran of Silicon Valley, Form Factor. I don't know if you guys know the electronics testing company. I see some head nods. He was the CEO. He was previously the CEO of president, I apologize, of a Russian seismic company, and he has 2 PhDs in nuclear physics. So with that, we're going to jump right into it. So you have folks here who know their business. I'm going to start with Mario, and the reason I start with Mario is that we were doing an interview with him in the morning, and he asked me, what should I talk about? And I said, whatever suits best. And he asked the lady, what do you think about oil and gas, or this gentleman? He says, dirty? And he cracked up. He said, let me explain it to you. With that, Mario, a quick description of oil and gas, and please pull the mic close to you. Thank you.
Well, it's true that most of people believe that oil is low-tech, dirty, and big. It is big, it might be dirty, but it's very high-tech. We discussed little seismic. When you look for oil, you start by doing an image. And seismic is, you send a sound wave downhole, and it reflects, and it's like doing ultrasound for a body. The only difference is the new systems now, you think of the standard one, big one, will have 200,000 sensors spread. Everyone is digitized at 24 bits, every 2 milliseconds, 24/7, going on for a few months. I'll let you calculate the amount of data it represents, because and you have to deal with that. And I would say this is really big data. And then people spend months to invert them using, in fact, beside I'm not sure how big are the NSA computers, but if you take away the Department of Defense and NASA computers, the seismic computers guys are the biggest in the country, by far. And you say the same thing all around in high-tech. Remember, as a nuclear physicist, I was always proud. We did a measurement in the past, which is used in the industry for 50 years, where you put something down in a well, which is a few miles down, you apply it against a rock, and you will measure the density of the rock with an absolute precision, not a relative precision, of 0.01 gram per cc. A few years ago, I went to the French Bureau of Standards and said, can you do the same just in the lab? They had no clue how to do it. So it is very high-tech. And, there is a high-tech, there is huge needs. I think that Ram told us about the new thing about shales. There is many things we don't understand in shales, how it does it happen. So what I think is, when there is technology, when there are needs, there should be room for entrepreneurs and good ideas. And that's really why we came here today.
Thank you. With that, Jim, right over to you. You invest in technology, and you invest in a lot of technology which is digitally driven. So taking the segue from Mario, what are you investing in, and what applies to the Valley?
So maybe I'll start that with kind of describing what may be an opportunity. So Ram did a great job setting the stage. When you think about the country of Norway, Norway about 12 years ago was producing 3.4 million barrels a day. Today they're at 1.8, 1.9 million barrels a day. So that loss of 1.6 million barrels a day is equivalent in a year of just about $60 billion for the country of Norway. Now, over those years that Norway was producing oil and gas, they would take core data from each well that they drilled in the North Sea. And in Norway today, there is a repository of that core. And this is a core that looks about the size of a well bore that they will pull out of the reservoir. So this is from down in the subsurface, and it's part of the reservoir. So the amount of knowledge in that rock is unbelievable. It's fantastic. And the opportunity for us today in the world, we get maybe 35% recovery. So the oil and gas that we find down in the earth, we can extract maybe 35%. It might be going down now because of the shales are lower than that. Norway does a fantastic job of working on recovering more than any other country. But this core data that they've extracted, which is fundamental to understanding how you can produce the reservoir the best, they've taken 84,000 miles of core over the time that they've been producing oil and gas. So for those of you keeping track, 84,000 miles, that will wrap around the Earth about 3 times. So that's the amount of reservoir data that they have in Norway, which is almost staggering. And the amount of that cost to extract it was $2.4 billion to extract that amount of core. And it sits in a repository as rock. And to analyze that rock, it's probably the one thing that is not digitized in the oil and gas that is an incredible opportunity remaining. So one of the opportunities is to take another technology, medical imaging, bring that in and analyze that rock with medical imagery to get a CAT scan effectively of that rock to understand what's inside that rock, just like a brain, and how the pore space and how oil and gas would move through that. And it's all about computers, once it's digitized, that you can analyze it and understand and look at sensitivities of how you improve it. So from a big data perspective and an opportunity to bring in new technology, that is really an incredible opportunity that I think is very relevant for this group here of how you attack that kind of big data. And that's the kind of thing that our money with Energy Ventures is going towards.
Thank you. Let's roll right to you, Art. Recently, you had a new venture funded, and if you could touch upon that, what it is and what is the value proposition that got it funded?
Sure. I am frequently in front of large crowds. I usually don't have the singing and the music behind me, but I do see a very excited crowd here. I want to first thank Ty and Sammy for inviting me. The crowd is not only enthusiastic and very warm, but also the content here, big data, the cloud, and the Internet of Things is a very, very good fit with oil and gas. And I say oil and gas as opposed to just energy. Ram did a great job of setting the stage. And about 15 years ago, I was like many of you out there in the crowd, I was embedded in my business, which was oil and gas at a massive scale with international operations, and thought I knew pretty much about a lot of things, but a friend of mine introduced me to Rick Smalley, who was a Nobel Prize winner in nanotechnology, and he talked about the major challenges in the world, and he had a very elegant way of starting with poverty, with hunger, with water, and he arranged the challenges. If you started with energy first and were able to have secure, reliable, affordable energy, then water's not a problem. It's 75% of the globe. And then with potable water, you have land with fertilizer, and it just struck me that the industry I was in, the power that it brings, and what's powering that industry is technology. So it's 3 things. One is revenue, and the revenue comes from producing oil and gas. Ram talked about in the shale, knowing where to go to find that huge data. But the data without analytics on top of it just doesn't mean anything. So applying that makes a huge difference. So that's the revenue side. The cost side, he showed the slides of the offshore platforms. Drilling one well in 8,000 feet of water, $100 million. There are cost savings there from analyzing data as well. The third thing, which I really like to focus on a little bit, is risk reduction or risk management. The new advances in sensor technology and batteries, deploying those technologies in oil and gas can generate even more information. And then with the cloud and smart analytics, managing that risk better is a huge thing. I heard this keynote speaker from Qualcomm, and while there were a lot of things that resonated, there are some big differences. Talking about failure is okay and not batting 1,000, depending on where you are in this business, batting less than 1,000 is just not acceptable. But if you look at what are the risks, where you're operating, and how do you mitigate them, there are places for entrepreneurs to take managed risk. And one of the best is redeploying technology that's already been developed and de-risked as far as the technology working in another field, and then redeploying that. We did that with sonar. Office of Naval Research developed some sonar. Company kept the IP. I joined their board, and we redeployed that to Subsea, and ended up after 3 years exiting to Teledyne. So,
yeah, what was the name of the company?
Blueview.
Right.
So taking technology that's been de-risked in another area, talked about medicine, our health fields, and imaging. There's another great example where I think there's a lot of food for a nice meal.
Well, so one of the good things that when I prepare with my panelists, I do not tell them what I arranged with the other panelists. Otherwise, they will just all hold hands and tell you what they want to hear. Mario, when I proposed to you the reapplication from other tech, you came back very strongly. You said, "Are you kidding me?"
No, but we have all stories, but why do we always think that we need to reapply from in? We can reapply from out, you know. A few years ago, we were developing a tool, just as an example, and we needed new nuclear sensors. And you know, my guys, they developed a nuclear sensor that could do spectroscopy in a crystal at 1 million counts per second. Anybody that understands anything about that knows that it's a factor 100 or 1,000 more than what most of people do, and it's a factor 100 more than anybody has ever done. You know, we broke all record ever. It's true, we never reapplied it, but I can see many applications in medical, etc., where we should have done it. So it's also our fault.
Well, one of the things I want to highlight is one of the technologies Mario developed is used in luggage screening, which is imaging of containers, enclosed containers. But let me jump over to you, Jim. Reapplication, you told a story about reapplication. Can you share with the audience a little bit of the oil and gas culture? Because your reapplication of the video conferencing technology a good 13 years ago had a beautiful collapse, loss of some funds. So if you could just highlight, how do you touch us? How do you connect with us? Because you're continuously trying to do. But he actually had plastic surgery for a permanent smile, so that's
All right, I'll start getting mean. If I'm a venture capitalist, I need to be mean, right?
Right, that's right.
Yeah, that's what I thought it was, vulture capital, when I joined, because I came from the oil and gas industry. And I think that's probably an important distinction, is that understanding oil and gas and the culture of oil and gas is fundamental. And what is difficult is bringing in a new technology into oil and gas. You may have heard the idea of the good old boy culture of the oil field and selling technology in the oil field. And I was very happy to hear Ram talk about, with venture capital investing goes a field trial. And it is so hard to get those early field trials when you're in that ramping up stage. And so I would say one of the big dangers is if you're bringing a technology into oil and gas, I hope it is very well established wherever it is that you're coming from, because that's going to be fundamental, because it's going to take some time to get it into oil and gas. So what would be very difficult is if it's brand new and it's a platform technology and you're looking at 8, 9, 10 different platforms at the same time and suffering on all 8, 9, 10 different platforms to get the innovation and get the adoption going. Then the pain of cash burning is what I would classify as acute, and I would steer clear of that.
All right, thank you. Well, let me jump to you. Could you talk about, or take just 30 seconds, touch on Meshify?
Internet of Things, deploying cloud-based technology, actually coming from Mosquito's systems. The company we are funding has an OEM that delivers 60-70% globally of the kit, and the distributors sell it and actually then maintain it, and every month the distributor comes out and fills it up, checks it out. Well, it turns out the distributors make more money on maintaining these systems than they do the initial sale. So with Meshify, they can basically log on and know which systems need what chemicals. And there was a knock, and I should complete this story. They sell the service for the same price, but actually go out to the site about 60% less. So they're making the same money and maintaining the system. But the knock-on effect here was the manufacturer actually started looking over the data and saw ways to improve their product as well. So,
well, thank you. Folks, one of the things we want to answer is what is money chasing? So one of the ways to do that is to have an incubator. We only have one really dedicated energy incubator in Houston. It's Surge. That's where Meshify was presented and funded. So there is that opportunity. It's a virgin playing field. With that, Mario, what is money chasing in oil and gas?
Big money. Well, think of it. You know, as Baker Hughes, we have a few thousand customers. If I just take my top 20, next year they'll spend $100 billion in exploration and production. Just the top 20 that I serve out of thousands. And these guys have big needs because they have problems. We have terms in every industry. If you go to a deep offshore platform or the shales, the big one it's called recovery. How much of this oil which is down do you get up to the surface so you can use? It's about 10% at best. In both places where Ram is going to spend billions, if we don't change the technology, he will recover 10% of what's down. It's frightening. Anything that help him gets a few more percent. Everybody that can do that will be greatly rewarded. Let's put it that way. Because it represents a big, big chunk of money.
Is there a specific area, Mario, one or two sectors that you can highlight that may be pertinent here?
So some of these things are very big and you need big investment, but sometimes you have small ones. I'll just take a completely different example. You have a lot of places where you have oil which is heavy. Heavy means because it's very high, it doesn't flow. We know why it doesn't flow. Basically, molecules are too big, they are tangled together. We know that anybody that can come, and to make them flow, we inject vapor at very high temperature, we heat the whole thing. It's pretty messy. And I always dream of if I can find a little bacteria that will cut that, because I know they exist. I just have to poke a few holes, come back a few years later, and it flows. Things like that. Who is going to do that?
So, for the bioengineer, it's a challenge. Can you create a bacteria?
This is pure biotechnology,
Yeah. So, if you can create a bacteria, we can drop down hole and come back after a few years and the reservoir flows. Brilliant. With that, over to you, Jim. It would have been so fantastic if you were the only venture person out there. But now with the growth of the economy, just about every oil operator, the oil gas services companies like Baker Hughes, everyone is a venture capitalist now. So why would we need to come to you?
It is quite amazing. There are a lot. I mean, when you look at the corporate venture capital in oil and gas, it really started in the late 90s with Shell and Chevron coming in. And Chevron has continued through that time. Shell spun theirs off privately. Statoil did the same. And then it went quiet for almost a decade. And now everyone is back in droves. And I think the interesting thing about corporate venture capital is it is very complementary to what we do as venture capitalists in there from a more independent side, because we, of course, don't have control of any assets. And when you're bringing in a technology and you need the adoption, and you're going through what I classify with Sammy as the valley of death, right? You're burning cash, you're trying to get that adoption curve going early. And the corporate venture capital has the assets to do that. So they're generally not putting significant amounts of money into these technologies, and that's really where we come from. From an independent venture capital perspective, we're from the industry. We're oil and gas people as well. That's what our background is in our experience. So we are independent, so you're not tied to just one client. What's very nice with corporate venture capital is hopefully it brings you at least one client, and that's your first client. But you also need the second client and the third client. And those second and third clients are hard to get. The first client is really hard to get. but you need to keep getting more clients. And that's where it's beneficial to have someone there that can help you bring in multiple clients, because you are going to need it in this industry. And I think that that's where this a little bit of a consortium approach really makes sense.
Jim, I have a company, and I could go to Ram directly, or I could come to you, and then you will put a premium on it. All at once, the valuation doubles. It's getting weaker, isn't it? I'll give you 30 seconds for a comeback.
You didn't know about this one, huh?
No, so the reality is a lot of the corporate venture capital, as we partner, usually it's us that is setting the valuations and leading that, because corporate venture capital doesn't want to own a significant portion of the companies. They're small. They don't want the liability of that. So we are very much partners in that way, and we're generally the ones that are setting valuations along that, and the corporate venture capitals are coming along. That's not all the time. There are others like ConocoPhillips that will set valuations, but 9 out of 10 are coming to us to collaborate.
All right, thank you. Well, Art, you have been in early ventures investments. Very quickly, 30 seconds, you have $1 million. What are you going after? Come at it from a digitization aspect, communication, sensor, Internet of Things. What are you doing?
Well, first thing is I prefer not to chase money. I prefer to understand a customer's needs and then get paid to solve their problems. And there are a number of organizations. Deep Star has 50 some odd companies. ConocoPhillips is a member of it, as well as Shell and several others. Repsy, ITF out of the UK, RDC out of Canada. So there are several organizations that very finely tune, this is exactly what we need, and then entrepreneurs and companies can build to that, as opposed to I have something and pushing it on them. And the area I like, in fact, we were just awarded a subsea chemical injection system from Repsy. So instead of dilutive funding, thank you, Jim. Anyway, we're being paid to deliver a specific solution to an organization.
Okay, so you are going at it as, I know what's needed.
Exactly.
Okay, well, I think a little bit otherwise. I think like Steve Jobs, but perhaps I can help a leapfrog. So, all right, with that, I'm going to go to Mario. Mario, oil and gas companies, assets and leases, oil services companies help those assets be realized with value. Entrepreneurs of the world, where do they go from your perspective?
40 years ago, operators were spending a lot of money in R&D. Sometime about 25 years ago, they decided that they needed MBAs and supply chain guys. And they fired most of their research guys. And in fact, it was left to a service company to continue to develop technology. And most of the technology is actually being developed in the service company. Some oil companies are saying they are coming back now, but this is a long process. So that's a reality of where we are.
So oil and gas services companies are where major portions of deep technologies are developed, and just the supply chain of oil and gas taking the drop out of the ground and getting it all the way through to where it can be utilized and turned into energy is quite extensive. Jim, we are talking about areas where there is significant digitization, like seismic. That's like about 2 to 3 terabytes on a daily basis, running for months.
So you made the calculation.
And so I did the calculations. You asked me to. So he kept on throwing the number at me, so I said, I better go ahead and punch this in really quick. All right, so any pure digitization plays left? I know you talked about the first one, where there is about $2.5 billion worth of 85,000 mile of core out there, which can be utilized, perhaps imaging of various types. What else?
And so that was just for Norway.
That's right.
Specifically, which is amazing, because that's about 2% of the world production. So the opportunity for digitization of the oil field, we've been talking in the oil field about the digital oil field for at least 10, maybe 15 years, and bits and pieces are happening. There was always a question of who's going to manage the business model, who's going to make the money from the digital oil field. So bits and pieces of the digital oil field are in process, and some of the technologies are amazing where it's looking at. And Mario mentioned the the seismic processing, where the computers, it always feels like that we're 5 years, we're looking 5 years forward. We need computer technology that we will get in 5 years from now. So we're creating shortcuts to deal with the data quality or the data size that we have. All we do is take shortcuts because the compute capacity is not caught up with what we really need. And so 5 years from now, we're going to be taking shortcuts on something bigger. You know, you think sometime you're going to catch up, but I don't know if we will, just because it is really big data, like Mario said. But I think the opportunity for this digitalization of things like rocks and understanding that and improving the recovery from 10% to more. I mean, the opportunities there within shale gas as we're learning what's happening and how these systems produce. To me, that the digitization of this is the single biggest opportunity in front of us.
Excellent. Art, did you have something to add?
Well, one thing, stepping back just a little bit, people talk about the industry. And our industry is a collection of very, very different players and different drivers. And for one thing, on the operator's side, ConocoPhillips, largest independent in the world, I think. But you know how many other independents there are? There are about 10,000 just in the United States. So you think about playing with, I won't use a dinosaur word, but the very large companies versus we own an interest in a small E&P company that has 20,000 acres in the Bakken.
Art?
5 guys.
Just quickly to E&P would be?
Exploration production. These are the guys, they're generally geologists, geophysicists, landmen. They get together with financing and basically acquire acreage and then get others to farm in a well, drill the well, and just prove there's something there, there's not, and then they'll flip it. And there's a whole food chain of selling smaller exploration production companies to larger ones to larger ones. A big example was Exxon buying XTO. And XTO kept their people, their processes, and they're probably right up there with ConocoPhillips as far as cost effectiveness because they did not layer on all the Exxon stuff. So the smaller players, the companies out here, the entrepreneurs, think of the customer. Not everyone out there is your customer. Picking the right one to deal with first makes a huge difference.
Excellent point. Well, with that, I'm going to close out with Mario, and I want to highlight something very interesting for you. Mario joined Baker Hughes about 2 years ago, and he conducted an internal crowdsourcing innovation challenge in which I think the whole company joined it, and the top 4 winners were given $1 million each to take their whatever they had won, their idea, and make it realize in a matter of 1 year. Now, Mario has also gone ahead, and this is the place where I need to thank Mario rather than my receiving the thanks. It's Mario and our technology fellow, Dr. Moose, who are the ones who have made this happen at TiEcon. They have sponsored us. And Mario has also sponsored our innovation center in Palo Alto. We're in the heart of Bay Area. So Mario, just quickly, with some closing comments, why build a center in San Francisco? What are your expectations? And moving forward, the services companies and the interaction with the entrepreneur.
I'd just like to say, you know, it's interesting when you look at big company. When we started this, I learned later it was crowdsourcing. I'd call it a contest, but but you know, I had in mind that we need to wake up and prove that people are innovative. But you know, in my mind, I always linked innovation and entrepreneurship. And you know, it's strange because we launched it. We had 60,000 people that could play with it. We had about 1,500 ideas, which was much more than we expected. But you know, out of the 4 winners, 2 of them didn't want to leave a full-time job and come and do that full-time. So we had innovation, but we certainly had a lack of entrepreneurship. And I guess that's an issue that we have maybe in big company. And that's maybe why we need guys like you, because, you know, like I said, to make things happen, you need to have a good idea, but you need to be obsessed by it and make it happen. And you know, reimagining these guys, they didn't even have to leave a company. They just had to move jobs. We just put them aside and say, okay, you still get paid, but for 1 year, you leave your old job and do that. Out of 4, 2 did not want to do. It struck me, which means that this year, when we redo it, we'll say to the guys from the beginning, if you're not ready to leave your old job, don't do it. Because but And one of the reasons why we also said it's linked, we need to put a place where you can get new ideas, you can start working on them in a way which is not set up in all the processes that you have in a company which is 60,000 people. 60,000 people, whichever way you do, you have bureaucracy which is living, people get relaxed with it, comfortable. And comfort and success don't always go together. So that's why we put some small centers in place like that, so we can have a little more energy, get faster. That's why we try to put this new crowdsourcing. But this time we have to make sure that we put entrepreneurship in it as a condition.
Thank you very much. With that, I would like to thank Jim, Mario, and Art for making the trek from Houston, being a part of this. Thank you very much to the audience.